All right. I would like to bring in my next guest. I have not talked to him in a while, so it would be great to catch up with him. Jeremy Kuzmarov. He is managing editor for Covert Action Magazine and author of several books on U.S. foreign policy. Jeremy, you have a book that is coming out soon on Gaza, correct? You're working with
No, on Syria,
on Syria. I'm sorry, working with
Dan
Kovalik.
Kovalek.
Yep, yeah.
Yeah,
He mentioned it once before when he was on the show. Welcome back, man. How you doing? You doing okay?
I'm doing great. Thanks. Good to be with you.
No, it's good to be with you too. There is again a lot of news that is taking place. Some of that stuff is taking place in regards to the negotiations in Russia, where you get to Zelensky is apparently going to Istanbul for the Istanbul 2.0 talks. You got European leaders getting Trump to agree with him to say, hey, we have a ceasefire deadline, and you better meet this deadline. You get Merz saying, clock is ticking, Putin, as if Putin cares about any European leader. These people are the most pointless people on the planet. And yet they act as if they have some kind of power. They have no power at all without the United States. In fact, even the sanctions that they were talking about passing, they point out that they require the US to even do that. And so from Trump's side, he is sending Witkoff and Kellogg. And it's like, okay, so Kellogg is going to take that moronic plan that was already turned down to Istanbul. Why? Why? So you just don't want to deal. That's what it is. It's like you're really going to take that long flight just to fail miserably. Okay, okay. Putin said direct talks. He didn't say anything about the U.S. This was something Zelensky brought in. But I want to get your take on something. Malouf made a point yesterday, and I guess I've made the point myself. This notion of any negotiation that takes place about Ukraine, that Russia and the U.S. are talking about, is about more than Ukraine. By definition, it has to be because Ukraine has lost the war. And so, if we're just talking about, meaning if I'm Putin and I'm having a conversation with Zelensky, okay, Zelensky has no cards. If this war keeps going, your military will fail. You will lose. We will take Odessa. Hell, we may even take Kiev if you keep pushing us to do so in order to quote unquote denazify the country. So any terms that you come to me with are just terms, let's say, of convenience for me to stop the war because I just don't want to keep the war going. But if I need to, I can keep going. You can't. So you have no cards. In a negotiation, you will lose. You will be, by definition, at a weaker point in regards to any kind of negotiation. Now, if you are Trump having that conversation, okay, well, Ukraine is an item on the list, not the main thing on the list. And there are other things you can bring into it. Hey, I may bring in the sanctions, I may bring in business deals, I may bring in whatever else I want to bring into it, which means that you may get more out of that negotiations if the U.S. is involved because the U.S. has more to offer, as opposed to Zelensky having a one-on-one conversation where he has literally nothing to offer at all in that peace talks. Um, I suppose that's why Zelensky is like, hey, Trump, come with me into these negotiations. Because at some point, on some level, he realizes I have no cards to play in this. Not to mention, I don't think he wants a peace deal anyway. But give me your take on this.
Well, it's not clear on the U.S. side. There's a lot of posturing, but whether the U.S. is really willing to acquiesce to, Russian terms and acknowledge, Russian territorial gains and, grant the concessions necessary for a durable peace. And I mean, we shouldn't forget the underlying U.S. geopolitical agenda all along. They've basically been using Ukraine as a kind of proxy and battering ram, to weaken Russia. To I think divide. Part of the goal has been to create a breach between Russia and the rest of Europe, and especially Germany. Because that's what the U.S. fears. A strong Russian-German alliance would really undercut U.S. UK power in Europe and around the world. And they want to control the entire Eurasian region. I mean, if you read Brzezinski, it goes back to Halford Mackinder, the British imperial strategist. who viewed Eurasia, the dominance over Eurasia, as crucial to world dominance and worldwide hegemony. And Brzezinski basically draws off Halford Mackinder. He's not really a very original geostrategist. And so it's a very simple formula. They're using Ukraine to weaken Russia, get it bogged down in a quagmire. And also now Russia can intervene other places. And look, with Russia bogged down in Ukraine, look at Syria. The U.S. achieved its goal of regime change in Syria, and now Trump is meeting this week with Al-Jolani, and he's saying we're going to open our country to U.S. oil and gas companies, and we're going to build a Trump Tower in Damascus and give you all these contracts to rebuild our country, and we're going to try and normalize relations with Israel as Israel extends its occupation of Syria past the Golan Heights. So the U.S. has achieved its strategic goals, uh, and they don't really care about peace. I mean, imperial power don't care about peace, and they want to keep Russia preoccupied with Ukraine. So they're okay. They can create the illusion that, oh yeah, we're doing these peace talks and we want to broker a peace, but they're not really giving the concessions to Russia that will give Russia the confidence to end its operation. Because don't forget, Russia wants a demilitarized Ukraine, Ukraine that's not in NATO, and Eastern Ukraine that's they've taken those territories. And
Mhm.
they're not going to want to give them back. The people have voted in the referendum, and the people anyway in Eastern Ukraine are more oriented to Russia.
Right.
So I don't think the U.S. hasn't shown sign, the Trump administration, that they're willing to agree to those kind of terms. And so, yeah, Russia is not going to, give up what is won on the battlefield. And if Russia's goals aren't met, and they don't feel secure, because that could just, another war could break out any time if Ukraine is not demilitarized. Uh, Another war. So unless Russia's confident that their security is intact, but there's no sign that the Trump administration is willing to make those concessions. I mean, yeah, at some point, you're right. Ukraine will just lose everything because they can't continue to fight. They've lost. They don't have the manpower to carry this out indefinitely. I mean, Russia's a much stronger military, and Russia hasn't even yet resorted to a draft. So eventually, Ukraine will have to come to some kind of term. But the U.S. seems to be happy just having this drag out and pursue its ambitions all around the world.
So I think all things being equal, Trump may want to end it, but in his mind, he wants to end it on American terms, which is ludicrous at this point because you've lost the war.
Hmm.
Like it's almost like this inability to. It's the American exceptionalism thing that I think is playing in his mind. That I'm America. I have to be a winner. I have to be strong. I have to be all of these things. I have to save face. And I don't want them screaming at me that I've lost the war if I accept Russian terms. Okay, but you did lose the war. And on some level, he implicitly admits it when he points out, and if we walk in 3 years, Russia's going to take it all. Okay, for one, I don't think it's going to take 3 years. But whatever, the fact that you acknowledge it's a proxy war and that Russia's going to take it all implies you've lost. And so when Russia is saying, look, these are our terms. Now, there may be leeway in these terms if we can come up with a decent deal. You know, yes, this is part of our constitution, but maybe we can stop where we are. But yeah, Ukraine can't build up another military. And the denazification thing has to be on the agenda. Otherwise, you can't never get a normal Ukraine with these Nazis effectively in the government, in the political structure. Like, meaning, if you have a situation where they just build up another military in order to do this again in 5 years, okay, well, it defeats the entire point. So, like, from the Russian point of view, yeah, these are hard. These are red lines. They have to be red lines because that was the entire point of the special military operation. Now, whether an American president can accept that, Doesn't seem like he can, at the very least, not yet. Maybe when they get to the point where the military is starting to crack, and it seems like they are. I mean, I was looking at the advances that Russia was making just over the last few days. They're taking village after village after village, and they're getting in positions of like major cities in a way that Ukraine doesn't seem to be able to resist in the way that they were able to resist before, meaning they're getting weaker and weaker. Russia is bringing on 30,000 volunteers a month. Ukraine is snatching like 1,000 people off the street a month in order to press gang them into a military for them to die within a few days. This is unsustainable. And yet, Zelensky clearly doesn't want a ceasefire. The Brits and the Europeans clearly don't want a ceasefire, but they don't care about the Europeans. I mean, they don't care about the Ukrainians. By the way, one last point. Alexander Makaris, I think he's wrong on this. And I know that's bold of me to say so. Alexander Makaris made the point of saying that the Europeans are listening to the Ukrainians and is getting incorrect information in regards to what is happening on the battlefield, meaning they believe that the Ukrainians are in a stronger position than what they actually are. I don't think that's the case. I don't think they care. I don't think I don't think there's this love of Ukraine. I think the entire point of this was to stick it to the Russians. And even if it's to the last dead Ukrainian, they want them to keep sticking it to the Russians, meaning they want that last Ukrainian that is about to drop dead to stick it to that last Russian on his deathbed as he goes into that good night. Meaning, I don't think the Europeans care. They may have military analysts who are looking at the battlefield and saying, hey, this is bad. But I don't think it's this thing of, oh, we're getting misinformation. And so we are taking a position based on misinformation. I think they're taking their point of view is we need to build up our own military and we need the Ukrainians to keep fighting for as long as they can while we increase our military stocks, increase our military industries, build up our military capabilities, etc. It's not about whether or not Ukraine is doing good. It's about Europe and its ability to expand their own production. What is your take on that? Because I could be wrong on this. Maybe they are getting poor information. Maybe I'm just, you know, in a bubble on this stuff. What is your thoughts?
Well, I think you're correct. Look, if you have the information, they can get it very easily. I mean, sometimes, yeah, maybe they're not processing. You had this in the Vietnam War. A lot of American intelligence analysts were presenting good documentation, yeah, including Ray McGovern, who went on to found the Veteran Intelligence Professionals for Sanity. He started off in Vietnam, and he worked with a guy Sam Adams, and they were providing good intelligence on how strong the Vietnamese communist forces were, and how intractable the U.S. strategy was. But their reports were just dismissed because there was this underlying, political agenda and perhaps an underlying ideological zealotry. So I think we're seeing a parallel here, maybe a mixture of both a political agenda and an ideological, in many ways irrational anti-Russian zealotry that is resulting in this heavy investment in military operations that are ultimately, like Vietnam, destined for failure.
You're right. I guess it could be either way, right? It could be maybe they are given the data, but they just don't believe it. I mean, it could be like the war in the first place, where they were like, Russia is Nigeria with snow. They're a gas can masquerading as a country. We just need to, we can destroy them economically and militarily. And then in reality, it doesn't work out that way. It's just not the
Yeah.
case. With Yemen, that's another good example. The US believes it can get air superiority within a few days. And after 30 days of bombing, not only could they not get air superiority, they nearly get planes knocked out the sky, ships nearly get hit. I mean, they get it wrong. It could be that. So you could be right.
Yeah, and the European case, I mean, it's totally irrational because they would actually benefit. I mean, Russia is an abundant source of oil and natural gas, and with the Nord Stream pipeline, it would have been a tremendous benefit to their economy. Instead, they're paying much more for natural gas from the United States. So this is just totally irrational. And I think in the Cold War, the publics were whipped up into this hatred of communism through the culture and also the religious institutions. But you don't have that today, and so a lot of these leaders are hated by their own population. They live in a bubble. They're these kind of zealots, Russophobic zealots, and they don't have a huge support among their own population, although it seems to be more the liberal left these days that got caught up in this Russophobia, and that the conservative elements are the ones not buying it, and so they're facing hazards politically as to how long they can survive, and these are really hated leaders, whether in Britain or if you talk to people or go times I've traveled in Europe and talked to people, they really hate those people. Whether it's Keir Starmer or Macron or in Germany, their population, a lot of them at least, really hate these leaders.
What's wild about that? That's a really good point. We don't know if in 5 years they're even going to be there. I mean, if Marie Le Pen's party wins the national rally, okay, well, she's skeptical of this war. She just gave a speech going after Europe for being warmongers and for the conduct that they've taken in regards to this war. If you look at the AfD, they're the number 2 party in Germany at this point. You could easily conceivably see them moving to the number 1 slot based on German behavior in regards to this conflict. Okay, well, those are the 2 main countries with the UK, but the UK is not technically considered part of the European Union. So if that axis breaks, then all of this stops. Like they can't sustain this. Georgie Maloney is not for it. So they're already in a precarious position politically, as is. So, no, that's a really good point. I want to get something else. I want to hit you with something else. There's a Kellogg thing, but I'm not going to go to the Kellogg plan. I want to go to Ritter, Scott Ritter. I hear this argument consistently that it's not Trump, it's the people around Trump. And I heard it today when I was having a conversation with Caleb. I hope he's not pissed off that we're at odds with the conversation. But this notion that, well, it's not Donald Trump. It's somebody else who's sabotaging Trump. It's somebody who's around Trump that's hurting his ability to do X or Y. And it's like, why are we acting like Trump is not the president of the United States? Why are we acting like Trump didn't hire people? If people indeed are policy, which I think they are, you hire somebody because you want that person's foreign policy or that person's policy. Otherwise, why are you hiring them, right? If I'm hiring RFK Jr., well, his big thing was childhood health. Okay, I'm putting him in Health and Human Services. He's running a policy that I care about. If I'm hiring Kellogg, if I'm hiring Waltz, if I'm hiring Rubio, if I'm hiring Gabbard, I'm hiring these people for very specific reasons because people are policy. And so when people are like, it's the people around Trump that's doing it, I'm like, dude, Trump is the president of the United States. If Trump wanted to walk on day one and say, this is Joe Biden's war, he could have done that. If Trump wanted to say, I'm stopping all of the weapons and I'm getting my proxy on board, he could have done that. He did not do those things. Ritter was on Judge Nap. Judge Nap, fantastic show, by the way. Okay, why can't I pause him? Why can't I pause him? What the hell? Okay, what the hell? Give me 1 second, Jeremy.
Okay,
Okay.
it
I
froze
don't know
for a
what's going on
second.
with that. For whatever reason, he wouldn't shut up. I could not shut him up. All right, so I'm going to play this clip and listen to what he says here, because I think what he's saying here is wrong. It's not given, it's almost taking agency out of the hands of the president of the United States, which I think is very weird. But
sinking the Iran
this
policy.
is
He's
Ritter
saying
take on this.
Marco Rubio is a bigger traitor to Donald Trump and Donald Trump's policies than Mike Pompeo was. It is Marco Rubio that has sunk the Russia policy, and he's sinking the Iran policy. He's preventing Trump from achieving the policies. When I say prevent Trump, it's because Trump is ultimately, at the end of the day, a very weak and insecure man who doesn't have what it takes to stand up, look people in the eye, and say, you're fired. And that's what he needs to do to Marco Rubio right now. Fire him, terminate his existence. But he took $100 million from Edelman's widow, and gosh, he surrounded himself with the wrong people. But Donald Trump, this is why he's failing right now, because of Marco Rubio. And Marco Rubio is behind Mike Waltz being kicked out.
So the man who made a career of firing people, who in his first administration, people were being fired left and right, doesn't have the stones to fire people. And the reason that he's failing is because of one of his minions, his underlings. And that is the reason why Trump is failing, because Rubio is sabotaging everything that he's effectively doing on the peace front in Ukraine, despite the fact that Trump is the president. Trump hired Rubio, and Trump at any point could have walked. Trump at any point could have stopped the weapons. Trump at any point could have said, look, until you come to terms, you're getting no more weapons, no more intelligence, no more anything, or hell, you're not getting it anyway because we're trying to make a deal. Meaning Trump has agency. I don't know why people like Ritter are acting like Trump doesn't have agency in this process. I don't get this argument. Give me your thoughts on this.
Well, first, when I saw this, because you sent it to me yesterday, it reminded me of what I've seen with the Kennedy. There's this group of Kennedy cultists, like Oliver Stone. And, I love these guys, but I think they're a bit misguided. They say the same thing on this issue. When it comes to Kennedy, they say, oh, he wanted peace in Vietnam and all around the world, but there was McNamara, and he was fighting all the people in his administration, and he had a different vision. But he's the one who appointed McNamara. He appointed Dean Rusk. He appointed Walt Rostow, who was this super anti-communist, tied with the CIA, who had all these schemes to defeat left-wing guerrilla movements around the world. And Kennedy was, in fact, enthralled with counterinsurgency and countering wars of liberation. So it kind of just reminds me of the same thing. They build up the president as some kind of idealistic and messianic figure, and then, it's his advisors who did him bad. He was trying to fight them and fight the establishment. But it's not how American politics works. I mean, the president is, you have to look at the structural forces in American politics that put people in power. And, Kennedy, his case, he came from a very, very wealthy family, and his father bankrolled his campaigns, and he was tied with a lot of his appointees came from the Rockefeller Foundation and, big corporations. And with the Trump case, I mean, here's a billionaire who's tied with all the, uh, you know, top 1% of the power elite who put him in power. Uh, and I mean, yeah, he says things to appeal to a certain base to make like, he's an anti-war person one day, but then he says something the other day, when he's talking to a different audience, that he's going to show American muscle. And look, Trump in his first term increased the military budget from what already was gargantuan levels, and now he's talking about a $1 trillion military budget for 2026. And I mean, he had this track record even on the Russia issue. They attacked him as a Putin lover or stooge. But I mean, in his first term, he ramped up the conflict in Ukraine. He tore up the arms control treaties with the Russians. We've just been talking about how they're going nowhere with these peace talks. Meanwhile, he's bombing Yemen. He's making agreement with Syria to open it up to U.S. oil corporations. He's threatening China. I mean, that's who Trump is. So yeah, he appointed Rubio. I mean, yeah, Rubio is a well-known hawk, extreme right wing, and he comes from the anti-Castro community in Florida. That is just the ultra right, extreme hawk. but he was Trump's boy, and he was delegated to carry out a lot of these policies and negotiations. So, yeah, I don't see any proof or truth behind what Ritter is saying, and I like Ritter. A lot of what he said in the past has been good. And, he was heroic in exposing the WMDs,
Yeah.
but it doesn't mean he's right about everything. And the same goes for all people like Oliver Stone when they talk about Kennedy. I mean, I think they were right about how Kennedy was assassinated. There was a wider conspiracy, but they tend to idealize Kennedy, as some people tend to idealize Trump the man.
Yeah, I agree with you. And again, no shade on Ritter, no shade on Napolitano. I just disagree with his take on this. And just like I disagree with Caleb's take on this. And I love Caleb also. Like, I can like somebody and disagree with him. They act as if left to his own devices, he'd be this dove. I don't think that's the case. I mean, the fact that he was bombing Yemen and then bragging about it on Twitter gets across that life, especially certain people's lives, don't really matter to him. For all of this talk about, oh my God, I want the killing to stop. Trump is paying for a genocide in Gaza. Put it in context. The murdering of women and children in Yemen, many of the things that he was hitting wasn't even, they were just civilian targets. So this notion that, oh my God, he cares about life. Okay, I don't buy that premise. That is self-evident wrong. Donald Trump has agency to make choices on the issue of the war. He chooses not to. He's sending Kellogg to the Ukraine. I mean, I'm sorry, to Istanbul to negotiate. Okay, well, Kellogg's plan is nonsense. The notion that the Russians are going to accept NATO in Ukraine when they've already told you that is a red line. Okay, is Rubio making that choice? Witkoff was the one that was doing the negotiations, not Rubio. Now, they may have had internal discussions in the White House, but Witkoff was the one who went the first time around and came back and says, if you want to end the war, you have to do this. Trump decided he didn't want to do that. And instead, he goes with, okay, let's go with Kellogg. Okay, well, no. It's like meaning as president, you are making a choice. And the choice that you're effectively making is dead on arrival. And yet, the guy who had that plan that was dead on arrival is the guy that you're sending to Istanbul with Witkoff to negotiate. What do you think you're going to get out of that? Is that Rubio making that choice? Or is that Trump making that choice? And if it's Trump making that choice, how are we blaming Rubio for this? I just don't get this notion of blaming the millions in order to try to give a pass to the principal, who is the one with agency in this process. I don't get it.
Yeah, and an added factor that it's evading this focus on personalities within the administration is evading the structural forces that drive U.S.
Yes.
foreign policy and imperialism. And we see consistent policies across administration, whether it's Trump, whether it's Biden. And it's a quest for global domination to open up country to U.S. corporations. And that doesn't really matter. That the president in a way is a figurehead because he required, there are billions of dollars that went into the elections to get him elected, and he had to raise all that money from. These are the forces that really are driving this foreign policy. And if he were to counter that and appoint a real pacifist as a Secretary of State, he wouldn't last long in the presidency. They would plot a coup immediately against him. So he appoints a hardliner like a Rubio. But I mean, yeah, Trump, of course, is his own person, and he's always been an arch nationalist and
Mhm.
militarist. I mean, he's only against certain wars, usually when they become unpopular. I
Right.
mean, at the time, he was not part of any peace groups that were trying to oppose it. Principal people who marched or who wrote articles, who often faced censorship or loss of jobs or ridicule. Trump was never part of that
Mm-mm.
community of principled people. He's just I mean, he's your typical politician, con man who says what he says one day and something else the other day if he thinks it'll advance him politically. He's a man of no principle, And you
Yeah.
can see that in a lot of the policies he carried out, including the draconian immigration policies. There's no
Yes.
regard for humanity in those policies, like many of others' policies. So I don't know where Ritter's coming from, but
By the way, no regard for humanity, no regard for the U.S. Constitution, no regard for the Emoluments Clause, no regard for
yeah,
human life. I mean, like
yeah,
you can go down the list. No regard for anything,
exactly.
for honesty.
Yeah,
Like all of these things, like right, all of
yeah.
these things matter less than his own ego and what he wants. And and I want to double down on the point you made because it's a point that Brian Valetic makes all the time. It's less about the man, and it's more about when you're in that office, you have a view of the world. And in that view of the world, I'm the US president. I'm a powerful guy. People have to listen to me. They need to do what I say, even if I'm losing the war. Like, meaning Trump is trying to dictate an outcome in a war that he's already lost. And he's acting as if he's a mediator in a war that he's a principal in. I mean, for God's sake, they're still firing missiles. Like, but in the Victory Day parade, just before the parade, they were firing 500 drones, HIMARS, which means US intelligence going into them firing those things into Russia or at Russia. I mean, so like this notion of I'm a mediator is nonsense. What Trump wanted was to freeze the conflict. That's what he wanted. In the same way that the Syrian conflict was frozen. And you saw what happened in the Syrian conflict, which sprung up back to life at the most inopportune time. He wanted to freeze it, move over to China, and at some point come back around to it, handing it off to Europe in order to keep tension in regards to Russia. That's not really ending a war. That's not really a guy who's going into quote unquote peace. That's him trying to manage what he considers to be a losing conflict in a way that is in America's interest. That is different than what Russia wants, which is we want to settle this. Period. Those are different things. I'm going to give you the last word, Jeremy.
No, absolutely. Yeah, I think your analysis is right on today, in much of what you said. And on that point, I mean, look, the U.S. helped develop the report that came out that it was the CIA that invested, I think it was $1 billion or however much to develop Ukraine's drone industry. So now that they can strike into Russia, and that's what they're doing repeatedly. So, and the U.S. has provided all those weapons, including the long range weapons, and Trump has green-lighted those weapons, continuing from Biden, that have enabled Ukraine to directly attack Russia in an unprecedented way. So yeah, to make like this is some kind of peace, can person. I mean, if you go back in Trump's first administration, he greenlighted the selling of Javelin anti-tank missiles, which Obama administration had refused. Although Obama was providing a lot of weaponry already at that point. So in this particular conflict, yeah, he'd never been a man of peace. And if you look at the record, yeah, of U.S. foreign policy, they always used double talk. I mean, they on the surface they presented, oh, we're trying to broker a peace, but deviously they're planning behind the scene to advance their own power in any way they can, and they'll often break treaties, as with the NATO treaty. They had promised Russia they wouldn't expand NATO toward the border, and they violated that, and that goes deep in American history because I study American history, Native American history. They constantly sold out the Native American and betrayed any promises. So, Russia can't trust anything they say. And they know Trump is no different from other leaders. And in this case, yeah, a 30-day ceasefire would be just designed to help Ukraine regroup and get them more weapons, so maybe they can turn around the offensive. So yeah, to think that Trump is some kind of moral agent is, I think, ridiculous. And yeah, it's just a consistent pattern. Unfortunately, I think Democrats and Republicans carry out the same kind of foreign policy. And until we develop a grassroots, I think the American public needs to be better educated about how the U.S. has run its foreign policy in an imperialistic way and antagonized countries and created conflicts, and to build a progressive anti-imperialist movement. Until that happens, we're going to see the same kind of trickery, deceit, and warmongering.
Jeremy, from your mouth to God's ears. And by the way, it's not just the progressive left. There's a right wing contingent that believed him about ending the war. Like there are elements of MAGA. Thomas Massey, what is her name? Marjorie Taylor Greene. She was very angry. Why are we going after Iran? We're not putting another dollar into this war. Like, meaning there are some true believers on the right. Rand Paul, Daniel McAdams. Like, there are people who would have a right-left coalition on this thing of anti-war.
Yeah,
I just
that's
don't
what we
believe
need
it.
to build. Yeah.
Yeah, I just don't believe Trump is that guy.
No, I don't
Jeremy,
think so.
man, thank you for this. I really appreciate it. It's nice having you back. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Jeremy Kuzmarov, managing editor for Covert Action Magazine and author of several books on U.S. foreign policy. You be safe. Have a good day, okay?
You too.
All right.